The old Victorian house stood at the corner of Maple Street, its faded blue paint telling stories of better days. When Maya stepped out of her car that warm Saturday morning, she couldn't help but smile. This was it. Her grandmother's house, the place where she'd spent countless summers as a child, learning to bake cookies and listening to stories on the front porch. Now it was hers. Maya was 36 years old, a successful veterinarian who'd built a good life in the city. But when Grandma Rose passed away 6 months ago, she left Maya this house with a simple note that said, "Come home, baby girl. This neighborhood needs you." At first, Maya thought she'd just sell it and move on, but something kept pulling her back. Maybe it was the memories. Maybe it was the promise she'd made to her grandmother to never forget where she came from. As she walked up the front steps, a large German shepherd bounded out of her SUV behind her. This was Justice, her faithful companion for the past 3 years. She'd adopted him from the police department after he retired from canine duty. He was getting older now, but he was still sharp, still protective, and still the best friend she'd ever had. Justice had been through everything with her. The long nights at the veterinary clinic, the breakup with her ex-boyfriend, the grief of losing her grandmother. He seemed to understand her in ways that people sometimes didn't. The neighborhood looked different than she remembered. When she was a kid, there were block parties every summer. People sat on their porches and waved to each other. Kids rode bikes up and down the streets until the streetlights came on. Now many of the houses looked run down. Some had boarded up windows. The park at the end of the street where she used to play was overgrown with weeds, the swings covered in rust. Maya started unloading boxes from her car. A few neighbors peeked through their curtains but didn't come out to say hello. She noticed an older woman watering flowers across the street. The woman looked up, caught Maya's eye, then quickly looked away and hurried inside. It felt strange, cold. This wasn't the warm neighborhood she remembered from childhood. Over the next few days, Maya worked hard to make the house feel like home again. She painted the walls, fixed the creaky floorboards, and planted flowers in the front garden just like her grandmother used to do. Justice explored every corner of the property, marking his territory and settling into his new routine. He loved the big backyard where he could run and play, but Maya started noticing things that made her uncomfortable. When she walked Justice in the evenings, groups of young men would gather on street corners watching her. Not just casual glances, long hard stares. Sometimes she heard them laugh or make comments she couldn't quite make out, but the tone was clear enough. A few times she heard words she definitely could make out. Racial slurs muttered just loud enough for her to hear, but quiet enough that they could deny it if confronted. One evening, as she was coming back from her walk with Justice, a beat-up truck drove slowly past her house. 3 men inside stared at her expensive SUV parked in the driveway. One of them pointed and said something to the others. They all laughed. The truck circled the block twice before driving away. Justice growled low in his throat, his ears back. He sensed the threat even before Maya fully registered it. She started asking around, trying to understand what had happened to her grandmother's neighborhood. The mailman, a friendly guy named Pete who'd been delivering mail there for 20 years, finally opened up to her. He told her things had changed about 3 years ago. A group of men, led by someone the locals called D, had started causing trouble. At first it was small stuff. Loud music late at night, intimidating people in the parking lot of the corner store. But then it escalated. Houses got broken into, cars got stolen. People, especially people of color and elderly folks, seemed to be targeted more than others. "Why doesn't anyone do anything?" Maya asked Pete. He shrugged sadly. "People have called the cops dozens of times, but nothing really happens. The police show up, look around, take some notes, and leave. Nobody's been arrested. Some folks think certain officers are looking the other way on purpose. I don't know if that's true, but I do know people are scared. A lot of families have moved away. That's why you see so many empty houses now." Maya felt a knot form in her stomach. Her grandmother had lived here alone for the last 5 years of her life. Had she been scared too? Had she dealt with these same people? Maya wished she'd asked more questions when Grandma Rose was alive. She wished she'd visited more often instead of getting caught up in her busy city life. The following week, Maya started her new job at a veterinary clinic about 30 minutes away. It was a good clinic and she was excited to work there. She brought Justice with her most days since the clinic had a nice space where he could hang out while she worked. The staff loved him. and he was always gentle with the animals who came in for treatment. One Tuesday evening, Maya came home later than usual. She'd had to perform emergency surgery on a dog who'd been hit by a car. She was exhausted as she pulled into her driveway around 8 o'clock. Justice hopped out of the car and immediately went still. His body tensed. His nose went up, sniffing the air. Then he started barking, a sharp, urgent bark Maya had learned meant danger. She looked at her front door. It was slightly open. She knew she'd locked it that morning. She always locked it. Her heart started racing. She pulled out her phone, her thumb hovering over 911, but then she stopped. She walked slowly to the door with Justice at her side, his hackles raised. She pushed the door open wider. The house was a mess, but nothing was broken yet. Someone had definitely been inside, though. Drawers were pulled open. Cushions on the couch were moved. But it looked like maybe Justice's barking had scared them off before they could really get started. Or maybe they were just checking to see what was worth stealing. Maya called the police anyway. An officer showed up 40 minutes later, looking bored before he even walked through the door. He was a young guy, probably mid-20s, with an attitude that said he'd rather be anywhere else. He walked through the house, barely glancing at anything. "Anything missing?" he asked. "I don't think so. I think Justice scared them off. Your dog?" "Yes, he's a retired K-9 officer." The officer didn't seem impressed. He scribbled something in his notebook. "Well, you might want to think about getting better locks. Or maybe a security system. This neighborhood's had some problems lately." "I know about the problems. That's why I called you. Aren't you going to dust for fingerprints or something?" He actually laughed. "Ma'am, this is an attempted burglary where nothing was taken. We don't have the resources to process every scene like it's a murder investigation. Just be more careful, okay? And maybe consider moving somewhere safer." Maya felt her anger rising but kept her voice calm. "My grandmother lived in this house for 40 years. This is my home," the officer shrugged. "Suit yourself. But don't say nobody warned you." He handed her a case number on a piece of paper and left. Maya stood in her living room, Justice pressed against her leg. She looked around at her grandmother's house, at the home she was trying to reclaim, and she made a decision right then. She wasn't going anywhere, and if the police weren't going to help her, she'd have to help herself. But she'd be smart about it, strategic. Because Maya hadn't just survived veterinary school and built a successful career by giving up when things got hard. She knew how to plan. She knew how to be patient. And she had Justice, a trained police dog who was far more reliable than the officer who'd just left. She spent that night researching security systems online, making notes, and forming a plan. Tomorrow she'd start making some changes. Changes that would ensure if anyone tried this again, she'd be ready. More than ready. 2 weeks passed since the attempted break-in. Maya had installed a basic security system with cameras at the front and back doors. Nothing fancy, but enough to make her feel a bit safer. She'd also changed all the locks and added motion sensor lights around the property. Justice seemed more relaxed too, though he still did his nightly patrols around the house before settling down to sleep. Maya was starting to find her rhythm. Work at the clinic was going well. She'd made friends with a couple of her co-workers, and the long days kept her busy enough that she didn't have too much time to worry about the neighborhood situation. She'd even started to think maybe that first incident was just a one-time thing. Maybe whoever tried to break in had moved on to easier targets. She should have known better. It was a Thursday evening. Maya had stayed late at the clinic to finish up some paperwork and prep for a surgery scheduled for the next morning. Justice was with her as always, sleeping peacefully under her desk while she worked. She didn't leave the clinic until almost 9 o'clock. The drive home felt longer than usual. She was tired, looking forward to a hot shower and maybe watching something mindless on TV before bed. When she turned onto Maple Street, everything looked normal. The streetlights cast their usual yellow glow. A few houses had their porch lights on. Nothing seemed out of place. She pulled into her driveway, hit the button to turn off the engine, and reached for her purse. Justice stretched in the back seat, yawning. That's when she saw it. Her front door was wide open. Not just unlocked, actually standing open, light from inside spilling out onto the porch. Maya's stomach dropped. Her hands started shaking. She grabbed her phone, and this time she did call 911 right away. The dispatcher told her to stay in her car, that officers were on the way. But as Maya sat there waiting, staring at her open front door, she felt something else besides fear. Anger. Hot, burning anger that someone had violated her space again, that someone thought they could just take whatever they wanted from her. Justice was alert now, staring at the house, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Maya put her hand on his head. "Easy, boy. We're going to wait for the police this time." 20 minutes passed. Then 30, no police. Maya called 911 again. The dispatcher sounded annoyed, told her the officers were dealing with another call, they'd get there when they could. Maya hung up and made a decision. She couldn't just sit in her car all night. Whoever had broken in was probably long gone by now anyway. She got out of the car, keeping Justice on his leash but letting him lead slightly. He pulled toward the house, nose working. They walked up the front steps slowly. Maya's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She pushed the door open wider and reached for the light switch. What she saw made her knees weak. The house had been completely trashed. Her couch was flipped over, cushions torn open with stuffing everywhere. The TV was gone. Her laptop was gone. Picture frames had been swept off the shelves. Glass shattered across the floor. In the kitchen, cabinets hung open, contents dumped out. They'd taken her grandmother's silver tea set, the one that had been in the family for 3 generations. Her jewelry box from upstairs was dumped out on the bed. Everything valuable gone, including her grandmother's wedding ring, the one thing Maya treasured most in the world. But the worst part, the part that made Maya actually gasp out loud, was the walls. Someone had spray-painted ugly words across her living room wall. Racial slurs, hateful messages. "Go back where you came from. You don't belong here." Other words so vile Maya felt sick reading them. She stood there in the middle of her destroyed home. Justice pressed against her leg and felt tears running down her face. Not just because of the stolen items or even the hateful words, but because this had been her grandmother's house, her safe place, the home filled with good memories. And someone had deliberately destroyed it, poisoned it with their hate. The police finally showed up 45 minutes after her first call. 2 officers this time. One was the same young guy from before. The other was older, with gray hair and a tired expression. They walked through the house, taking pictures with their phones, making notes. The younger officer kept shaking his head like this was somehow Maya's fault for not leaving when he'd suggested it. The older officer seemed slightly more sympathetic. "This is bad," he said, looking at the spray-painted walls. "This might qualify as a hate crime, which means we can bring in detectives." Maya felt a tiny spark of hope. "Really? You'll actually investigate this time?" The officer hesitated. "I'll file the report with that classification. Whether detectives get assigned, that's not up to me. Budget cuts and all that. We're pretty understaffed. So basically nothing's going to happen," Maya said flatly. The officer looked uncomfortable. "Look, miss, I understand you're upset. But honestly, this neighborhood's got problems. Has for a while now. If you've got somewhere else you can stay, family maybe, you might want to consider it, at least temporarily." "This is my home," Maya said for what felt like the 100th time. The younger officer snorted. "Some home. Looks like a war zone." Maya turned to look at him, really look at him. "You know what I think? I think you know exactly who did this. I think everyone knows. There's a gang operating in this neighborhood, targeting specific people, and nobody's doing anything about it." The young officer's face flushed red. "That's a serious accusation. You got any proof?" "Do your job and maybe we'd have proof," Maya shot back. "All right, that's enough," the older officer said, stepping between them. He turned to Maya. "We'll file the report, document everything. That's all we can do right now. I suggest you get this place secured tonight. Board up that door until you can get it fixed properly. And seriously consider staying somewhere else for a few days." After they left, Maya sat down on her overturned couch and just cried. Justice climbed up next to her, something he wasn't usually allowed to do, and rested his big head in her lap. She buried her face in his fur and let it all out. The fear, the anger, the overwhelming sense of violation and helplessness. But as she sat there, something shifted inside her. She thought about her grandmother, who'd marched in civil rights protests in the 60s, who'd faced down discrimination and hatred with her head held high, who taught Maya that sometimes you have to fight for what's right even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Maya wiped her eyes and looked around at the destruction. Then she pulled out her phone and started taking her own pictures. Detailed pictures. Every angle, every hateful word on the walls. Every drawer pulled out. She documented everything, taking her time, being thorough. Then she went to her security system panel. The cameras had been recording. She pulled up the footage on her phone, her hands still shaking slightly. And there they were, clear as day. 4 men, faces visible, breaking in through her back door. She watched them ransack her house, laughing as they spray-painted the walls. One of them held up her grandmother's wedding ring to the camera and smiled before pocketing it. Maya saved the footage to 3 different places: the cloud, an email to herself, and a thumb drive she kept in her car. She wasn't going to lose this evidence. Then she started calling. First, she called a friend from veterinary school who'd become a civil rights attorney, left a detailed message. Then she called a locksmith for an emergency service, then a cleaning company that specialized in biohazard and vandalism cleanup. It was 2 in the morning before Maya finally lay down to sleep, fully clothed, on her bed upstairs, with Justice curled up next to her. The house was secured as best she could manage for tonight. Tomorrow she'd start making real changes, because Maya had realized something important as she sat in her destroyed living room. These people, whoever they were, had made a huge mistake. They thought she was just another easy target, another person they could scare away. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Maya wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She was a doctor, a problem solver, someone who'd built a career on staying calm under pressure and finding solutions. And now she had evidence. She had proof. Most importantly, she had Justice, 70 pounds of trained protection, who was loyal to her above everything else. As she drifted off to sleep, exhausted but determined, Maya was already making plans. Real plans. Strategic plans. If the system wasn't going to protect her, she'd protect herself. And maybe, just maybe, she'd help protect this whole neighborhood in the process. Her grandmother hadn't raised a quitter, and these people were about to find that out the hard way. Maya woke up the next morning with a stiff neck and puffy eyes. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then reality came crashing back. The break-in, the destruction, the hateful words still spray-painted on her walls downstairs. Justice was already awake, sitting by the window, watching the street below like a guardian. She reached over and scratched behind his ears. "We've got work to do, buddy," she whispered. The first call of the day was to her friend Rachel, the civil rights attorney. Rachel had graduated from vet school, but decided law was her real calling after witnessing too many injustices. They'd stayed close over the years, texting regularly and meeting up whenever they could. When Rachel called back an hour later, her voice was furious. "Maya, this is textbook hate crime territory, and the fact that the police have basically done nothing, that's a civil rights violation too. I'm driving up this weekend. We need to document everything properly and start building a real case." "Against who, though? I have the footage of the break-in, but I don't know who these people are." "That's what investigations are for. Listen, if the local police won't do their job, we go higher. State police, FBI if we have to. This kind of pattern, targeting minorities in a specific neighborhood, that gets federal attention." Maya felt something she hadn't felt in days. Hope. Real hope. But she also knew this would take time. Legal processes moved slowly. She needed to do something now, something to protect herself and figure out exactly what was happening in this neighborhood. After hanging up with Rachel, Maya called into work and took a few days off. Her boss understood completely and told her to take whatever time she needed. Then she got to work. The cleaning crew arrived first, professional and efficient. They tackled the spray paint and the mess while Maya started making phone calls. She called the elderly woman across the street who'd avoided her that first day. After some gentle persuasion, the woman, Mrs. Chen, finally opened up. Her voice was quiet, scared. "They call their leader D," Mrs. Chen said. "Him and his friends, they've been terrorizing this neighborhood for years. They broke into my son's house 2 years ago. Took everything valuable. My son wanted to fight back, but I begged him not to. These are dangerous people, Maya. They don't like anyone who isn't like them, if you know what I mean." "Has anyone tried to organize? Fight back together?" Mrs. Chen laughed bitterly. "We tried once, about a year ago, got a petition going, planned to take it to City Hall. 3 people who signed that petition had their houses broken into the next week. One family's car got set on fire. The message was clear: keep quiet or else." After talking to Mrs. Chen, Maya spent the next 2 days quietly going door to door, talking to neighbors. Not everyone would talk to her, but enough did. She heard story after story. The Latino family on Oak Street who'd had their windows smashed 3 times. The elderly black man 2 blocks over whose grandson got jumped walking home from school. The Asian couple who ran the corner store and had to pay protection money just to keep their business from getting vandalized. A pattern emerged. D and his crew, about 8 guys total, had essentially taken over several blocks. They operated mostly at night. They targeted anyone they deemed an outsider, with people of color getting the worst of it. And somehow they never seemed to face consequences. Several neighbors mentioned the same thing Mrs. Chen had, that certain police officers seemed to look the other way. Maya took notes on everything. Names, dates, addresses. She was building a case just like Rachel had taught her. But she was also learning something else. This neighborhood wasn't full of people who didn't care. It was full of people who were scared. And scared people needed someone to stand up first, to show them it was possible to fight back. While she investigated during the day, Maya also started preparing for the possibility of another break-in. She upgraded her security system significantly. Hidden cameras now covered every angle of her property inside and out. They fed to a cloud service that couldn't be disabled even if someone destroyed the physical cameras. She installed smart locks that would alert her phone immediately if someone tried to tamper with them. She even got a separate alarm system that connected directly to a private security company, not just the police. But the most important preparation involved justice. Maya had adopted him as a companion, a friend. She'd maintained some of his basic training commands, but she'd never really pushed his full capabilities. That changed now. Every evening after her investigating was done, she worked with Justice for 2 hours. They practiced protection commands, specific hand signals and words that would tell Justice to guard, to alert, to hold someone in place without harming them. K-9 units were trained to detain, not attack unnecessarily. Justice remembered his training better than Maya had expected. It was like muscle memory coming back. His focus sharpened. His response time improved. Within a few days, they were working like a real team again. Maya also started varying her schedule deliberately. She'd leave the house at different times, come home at different times. She'd park in different spots. Sometimes she'd take Justice to work. Sometimes she'd leave him home. She wanted to be unpredictable, harder to monitor, because she was certain she was being watched. She'd noticed the same beat-up truck driving past her house multiple times. Sometimes it slowed down, the people inside staring at her property. Once she saw a guy taking pictures of her house with his phone. She took pictures right back, zooming in to get his face and license plate. On the 4th day of her investigation, Maya was walking Justice through the neighborhood when she passed the old community center. It was mostly abandoned now, windows boarded up, parking lot cracked and overgrown, but she noticed fresh tire marks in the lot, cigarette butts scattered around, beer cans in the corner. This was a hangout spot. She didn't stop or stare, just kept walking normally while Justice sniffed around. But she made a mental note. Later that night, she drove past slowly in her car. Sure enough, several vehicles were parked there, including that same beat-up truck. She could see people moving around inside through gaps in the boarded windows, light flickering like from a fire barrel or lanterns. Maya didn't get out. She just documented it, took pictures from a distance, noted the time in the vehicles. She was building a profile, understanding their patterns just like they'd been studying hers. The breakthrough came on day 6. Maya was at the corner store, the one owned by the Asian couple she'd talked to earlier. The husband, Mr. Park, had been reluctant to talk at first, but his wife had been more open. Maya was buying coffee when 2 young guys came in. They were loud, aggressive, knocking things off shelves accidentally and laughing about it. "Yo, Park, you got our money this week?" one of them said. Mr. Park's face went pale. I have it. Same as always. Better be. Dee doesn't like it when people are late. You remember what happened to that store on 5th Street when they tried to skip a payment? They took an envelope from Mr. Park and left, still laughing. Maya's hands clenched around her coffee cup. This wasn't just random violence and theft. It was organized. It was extortion. And it was definitely illegal in ways that even lazy cops couldn't ignore. She waited until the young guys were gone, then approached Mr. Park. "I recorded that," she said quietly, showing him her phone. "Audio and video. That's evidence of extortion." Mr. Park looked terrified. "Please, you can't use that. They'll know it came from here. They'll destroy my store. Maybe worse." "What if I told you we could stop them for real? Not just for you, but for everyone in this neighborhood." "How?" "The police don't care. We've tried. Maya leaned in closer. The police might not care, but the FBI cares about organized crime and hate crimes. I have a lawyer friend coming this weekend. We're building a federal case, but I need evidence. Real evidence. And I need people willing to testify once these guys are actually arrested. Mr. Park looked at his wife, who had been listening from behind the counter. They had a silent conversation with their eyes. Finally, Mrs. Park spoke up. "We have records," she said quietly. "Every payment we've made for the last 2 years. Dates, amounts, sometimes even names of who collected. We kept them in case we ever had a chance to use them." Maya felt her heart racing. "Can I make copies?" "For the case?" They nodded slowly. Mrs. Park went into the back room and returned with a notebook filled with careful handwriting. Dates, amounts, descriptions. It was meticulous. It was beautiful. It was exactly what Rachel would need. As Maya left the store with photos of every page in that notebook, she felt the momentum shifting. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was an investigator. She was building something real, and she had justice by her side, getting sharper and more alert every day. That night, Maya sat at her kitchen table with her laptop, organizing everything she'd gathered. The security footage from her break-in, the testimony from neighbors, the records from the parks, the photos of the abandoned community center, the pattern of targeting minority families. Rachel was driving up tomorrow, and Maya wanted to have everything ready. Justice lay at her feet, his head on her shoe. She reached down and petted him. "Almost there, boy. We're almost ready." She didn't know exactly when Dee and his crew would try something again, but she had a feeling it would be soon. They'd seen her around the neighborhood asking questions. They'd know she wasn't backing down. People like that didn't like being challenged. They'd want to send a message. Let them come, Maya thought. Let them try. This time would be different. This time she wouldn't be caught off guard. This time she had evidence, a plan, and a trained protection dog who was ready for anything. The hunters were about to become the hunted. They just didn't know it yet. Rachel arrived on Saturday morning with 2 large coffees and a briefcase full of legal documents. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing, the kind of person you wanted on your side in a fight. She and Maya spent the entire day going through everything Maya had collected. With each piece of evidence, Rachel's expression grew more serious and more determined. "This is bigger than I thought," Rachel said, spreading photos across Maya's kitchen table. "This isn't just random crime. This is organized intimidation, extortion, hate crimes, all of it. The fact that it's been going on for years with no real police response, that's the part that's going to get federal attention." They worked late into the evening, organizing everything into a proper case file. Rachel made calls to contacts she had in the state attorney general's office and even someone at the FBI field office. She put things in motion that Maya didn't fully understand but trusted completely. Before Rachel left Sunday evening, she gave Maya strict instructions. Document everything from here on out. Every interaction, every threat, everything. Keep multiple backups of all files. And Maya, be careful. When people like this feel cornered, they get dangerous. Maya promised she would be careful, but she also knew what Rachel was really saying. Things were about to get worse before they got better. She was right. It started small on Monday. Maya's car had a flat tire when she went to leave for work. Not just flat, deliberately slashed. All 4 tires. It cost her $600 to replace them and made her miss half a day of work. On Tuesday, someone threw a brick through her front window at 3 a.m. The alarm went off, Justice went crazy barking, but by the time Maya looked outside, whoever did it was gone. She had it on camera, though, a figure in a hoodie. The angle wasn't good enough to identify a face, but she saved the footage anyway. Wednesday night, Maya made a decision. She wasn't going to work Thursday. She told her boss she needed 1 more day to handle some things at home. But what she really did was set a trap. She made it look like she'd left for work at her normal time. She pulled out of the driveway, drove around the block, and parked 3 streets over. Then she walked back through yards and side streets, approaching her house from the back. Justice was already inside, and Maya had given him specific instructions before she left. He knew to stay quiet unless she gave him the signal. Maya let herself in through the back door and settled into the upstairs bedroom with a clear view of the street. She'd turned off most of the lights in the house to make it look empty. Her upgraded security cameras were all recording. She had her phone fully charged with 911 ready to dial, and she had Justice upstairs with her, alert and waiting. Hours passed. Maya was starting to think maybe she was wrong. Maybe tonight wouldn't be the night. But then, around 11:30, she saw headlights turn onto her street. The beat-up truck. It drove past once slowly, then circled back and parked 2 houses down. Maya's heart started pounding. She grabbed her phone and started recording with that too, a backup to her security system. 4 men got out of the truck. Even in the dim streetlight, Maya could see they were young, probably early 20s. They walked with that aggressive swagger, like they owned the world. They stood on the sidewalk talking for a minute, looking at her house. Then one of them pointed and they all started walking toward her property. Maya's hands were shaking, but she kept the phone steady. Justice was beside her, his body tense. She put one hand on his head, the signal to stay quiet and wait. The men walked right up to her front door. One of them tried the handle. Locked, obviously. They seemed to have a quick discussion. Then 3 of them headed to the back of the house while one stayed at the front as a lookout. This was it. This was really happening. Maya watched on her phone as the security camera at the back door showed the 3 men approaching. One of them had something in his hand, a crowbar maybe. He jammed it into the doorframe and pushed. The door held for a moment, then gave way with a crack of splitting wood. Maya waited. Her whole body was shaking with adrenaline, but her mind was clear. She'd practiced this moment in her head 100 times over the past week. She knew what she needed to do. The men were inside now, on the first floor. She could hear them moving around, talking to each other. Grab anything valuable. Dee wants to send this lady a real message. Check upstairs too. She's got to have more stuff up there. Maya heard footsteps on the stairs. This was the moment. She gave Justice the hand signal they'd been practicing. The signal that meant protect and detain, but don't seriously harm. Justice understood immediately. Years of police training kicked in like he'd never retired. The first man reached the top of the stairs, and Justice was on him instantly. Not attacking, but using his weight and training to knock the man backward. The guy screamed, a high-pitched sound of pure terror as he tumbled back down the stairs. Justice followed him down, barking now, a deep threatening sound that echoed through the house. The other 2 men on the first floor froze for a second. Then one of them yelled, "It's that dog, the big one." They tried to run for the back door, but Justice was faster. He cut them off, positioning himself between them and the exit. The men backed up, their bravado completely gone, replaced by obvious fear. "Get it away from us," one of them shouted. "Call it off. Please." Maya came down the stairs slowly, her phone still recording everything. She'd already hit the emergency button on her security app that went straight to the private security company. She'd also pressed record on a voice memo app. She wanted to capture everything these men said. "Justice, hold," she commanded. The dog held his position, not attacking but not letting them move either. He was a wall of muscle and training, and these men had no idea what to do. The man who'd fallen down the stairs was at the bottom groaning, holding his arm. One of the others was pressed against the wall, eyes wide. The third was actually crying, tears running down his face. "Please, lady, we didn't mean nothing. We were just messing around." Messing around. Maya's voice was cold. "You broke into my home. Again. You've been terrorizing this entire neighborhood for years." "We were just, Dee told us to." "Dee told you to?" "Say that again." Louder. The security company arrived first, 2 guards who took in the scene with professional calm. One of them called the police while the other helped Maya keep the 3 men contained. The lookout at the front had run when he heard the screaming, but Maya had clear footage of him too. Then the police arrived, multiple cars this time, lights flashing. And Maya felt a grim satisfaction when she saw it wasn't the young officer who'd dismissed her before. It was his supervisor, a lieutenant, and he looked serious. The 3 men were handcuffed and put in separate patrol cars. The one who'd fallen down the stairs kept complaining about his arm, saying he was going to sue. Maya almost laughed at that. Sue her for what? Defending her own home with her legally owned dog? The lieutenant came inside and looked around. He saw the broken back door, the men's footprints in her house, the crowbar they'd dropped. Then he looked at Maya. "Ma'am, I need you to walk me through what happened." Maya did, calmly and clearly. She showed him the security footage on her phone, then pulled up the cloud recordings on her laptop, multiple angles showing the men breaking in, discussing stealing her belongings, mentioning someone named D. The lieutenant's jaw tightened as he watched. "How long has this been going on?" he asked. "For me? 2 weeks? For this neighborhood?" "Years." Maya pulled out a folder, the one she and Rachel had prepared. "I have documentation, dates, incidents, witnesses. There's a pattern here. And it's not just burglary. It's extortion, hate crimes, organized intimidation." The lieutenant took the folder and started flipping through it. His expression grew darker with each page. "Why wasn't I informed about any of this?" "Your officers were informed. Multiple times. Nothing was done." He looked up at her, and Maya saw something in his eyes. Anger, but not at her. "Give me copies of everything you have. All of it. And I need you to come to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement. I have an attorney, she'll be with me." "Good. Bring her." He handed her his card. "My direct number. If anything else happens, you call me immediately. Not 911, me. Understand?" Maya nodded, taking the card. It felt surreal. After weeks of being dismissed and ignored, suddenly someone in authority was actually listening. The 3 men were taken away. Crime scene techs came to process the break-in, actually. Dusting for prints this time. Taking measurements. Doing all the things that should have been done weeks ago. It was after 2 in the morning before everyone finally left. Maya sat on her couch with Justice's head in her lap. Her hands had finally stopped shaking. She pulled out her phone and texted Rachel. "They came. We got them. All on camera. Police actually taking it seriously now." Rachel's response came immediately, even though it was the middle of the night. "I'm coming back up. Don't talk to anyone without me there. We're not done yet. This is just the beginning." Maya knew she was right. They had 3 men in custody, but D, the leader, was still out there. And men like that didn't take kindly to having their operations disrupted. This wasn't over. But for the first time since this nightmare began, Maya felt like she was winning. She had evidence. She had witnesses. She had a good lawyer, and now, a police lieutenant who seemed to actually care about justice. And she had Justice, her loyal companion who'd proven tonight that he was more than just a pet. He was a protector, a partner, a hero in his own right. Maya scratched behind his ears and smiled despite her exhaustion. "Good boy," she whispered. Such a good boy. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be statements to give, legal proceedings to navigate, and probably more danger to face. But tonight, Maya let herself feel something she hadn't felt in weeks. Not just hope, but confidence. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a fighter, and she was just getting started. The police station the next morning was buzzing with activity. Maya sat in a small conference room with Rachel by her side, going through her statement for the 3rd time. The lieutenant, whose name was Patterson, listened carefully to every word. 2 detectives sat across from them, taking notes and asking clarifying questions. This was different from every other police interaction Maya had experienced since moving back. These people were actually doing their jobs. "The 3 men we arrested last night are talking," Detective Patterson said, sliding some photos across the table. "They're scared, facing serious charges, breaking and entering, attempted burglary, and because of the previous hate crime documentation you provided, we're adding those charges too. They're looking at real prison time." "Are they giving up information about D?" Rachel asked, always the lawyer, getting straight to the point. Patterson nodded slowly. "They've given us a name. His real name is Derek Vance. He's got a record going back 10 years. Assault, drug possession, weapons charges. He's been out on parole for the last 3 years, which he's clearly violated. We've also connected him to at least 8 other break-ins in your neighborhood over the past 2 years. Maya felt a surge of vindication mixed with anger. 8 other families. 8 other people who'd gone through what she'd experienced, maybe worse. Why wasn't he arrested before? The detective shifted uncomfortably. That's being looked into. Internal Affairs is now involved. It appears that one of our officers, the one who responded to your first incident, has some connection to Vance. They went to high school together. We're investigating whether he deliberately failed to properly document complaints or investigate reports. So people suffered because a cop was protecting his buddy? Maya's voice was sharp. We don't have proof of that yet, but yes, that's what we're looking at. The officer has been suspended pending investigation. Rachel leaned forward. What about the extortion? The protection money being collected from local businesses? That's why the FBI is getting involved now, Patterson said. What you documented goes beyond local crime. This is racketeering, organized criminal activity, federal hate crime violations. The agents will want to talk to you too, probably next week. Over the next few days, things moved faster than Maya could have imagined. Derek Vance was arrested at the abandoned community center, along with 3 other members of his crew. The local news picked up the story. A reporter showed up at Maya's door asking for an interview. Rachel advised her to do it, to tell her story publicly. It would put pressure on the system to follow through, and it might encourage other victims to come forward. The interview aired on the evening news. Maya sat on her couch with Justice beside her, watching herself on TV. She looked tired but strong. She told the story simply, how she'd moved back to her grandmother's neighborhood only to be targeted by a hate group that had been terrorizing residents for years, how the police had initially ignored her complaints, how she'd gathered evidence and fought back with her loyal dog by her side. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Her phone started ringing with calls from neighbors she hadn't even met yet. People thanking her, people sharing their own stories, people saying they'd been too scared to speak up before, but now they wanted to help. Mrs. Chen called crying, saying she felt hope for the first time in years. The Parks from the corner store sent over a basket of fruit with a note that simply said, "Thank you for being brave." But not everyone was happy. 3 days after the news interview, Maya came home from work to find a message spray painted on her driveway. Snitch. You're going to pay. Her stomach dropped. Derek and most of his crew were in jail, but clearly someone was still out there, still angry, still wanting revenge. She called Lieutenant Patterson immediately. He sent patrol cars to watch her house that night and promised increased police presence in the neighborhood. But Maya knew she couldn't live under police protection forever. She needed a more permanent solution. She needed this community to come together and take back their neighborhood for good. That's when Maya had an idea. She talked to Rachel, who loved it immediately. They spent the next week organizing, making calls, printing flyers, and reaching out to everyone Maya had talked to during her investigation. 2 weeks after Derek's arrest, Maya stood in front of 50 people packed into the community center meeting room. It was the same building where Derek's crew used to hang out, but the city had agreed to clean it up and let them use it for community meetings. I know a lot of you are scared, Maya started, looking out at the faces in the crowd. Elderly couples, young families, business owners, all of them people who'd been victimized by Derek's gang. I was scared too. I'm still scared sometimes. But I've learned something important. They want us to be scared. They want us isolated, not talking to each other, not organizing. Because when we come together, we're stronger than they are. She talked about forming a real neighborhood watch. Not just people looking out their windows, but an organized group with communication systems and protocols. She talked about pressure cameras being installed on streets with the city's cooperation. She talked about regular community meetings so people knew each other and looked out for each other. She talked about a legal fund to help victims pursue charges against their attackers. This is our neighborhood, Maya said, her voice growing stronger. It belonged to our parents and grandparents. Some of you have lived here your whole lives. We're not going to let a handful of hateful people drive us out. Not anymore. The response was powerful. People started standing up and sharing their own stories. A man whose mother had been robbed. A woman whose son had been beaten for no reason other than the color of his skin. A couple who'd almost lost their business to extortion. Story after story, all held in silence for too long out of fear. But now the fear was transforming into something else. Anger, yes, but also determination. They elected Maya as the first president of the new neighborhood association. She tried to decline, saying she was too new to the area, but Mrs. Chen stood up and said, "You came back when you could have run away. You fought when the rest of us were too scared. You're exactly who we need." The vote was unanimous. Over the next month, things started to change visibly. The neighborhood watch organized quickly, with volunteers signing up for shifts monitoring the streets. People started cleaning up vacant lots and abandoned houses. The city, seeing real community engagement, started investing resources again. New streetlights went up. The park where Maya used to play as a child got new equipment and fresh paint. Local businesses started staying open later because the streets felt safer. The legal case against Derek and his crew moved forward steadily. The FBI investigation uncovered even more than Maya had documented. It turned out Derek had connections to a larger hate group operating across 3 counties. The charges expanded. What started as burglary charges became federal racketeering and domestic terrorism charges. Rachel kept Maya updated on every development, and each piece of good news felt like another weight lifting off her shoulders. The suspended police officer was eventually fired and faced charges for obstruction of justice. Lieutenant Patterson was promoted and implemented new training for officers on how to properly handle hate crime complaints. He even came to one of the neighborhood association meetings and apologized publicly for how the department had failed the community. But the biggest change was in the people themselves. Maya saw it every day. Neighbors who used to hurry inside without making eye contact now stopped to chat on the sidewalk. Kids played outside again. People sat on their porches in the evening. Block parties started happening, just like Maya remembered from her childhood. The neighborhood was healing. One Saturday afternoon, 4 months after that terrifying night when she'd caught Derek's crew in her house, Maya was working in her garden. She'd replanted her grandmother's roses, and they were finally starting to bloom. Justice was lying in the shade nearby, watching squirrels with casual interest but not bothering to chase them anymore. He was getting older, moving a bit slower, but he was content. A car pulled up and a young couple got out. They looked at the house next door, the one that had been vacant for over a year. Then they walked over to Maya's yard. "Excuse me," the woman said, smiling nervously. "We're thinking about buying the house next door. We were wondering what the neighborhood's like. We have a baby on the way and we want somewhere safe to raise our family." Maya stood up, brushing dirt off her hands. 6 months ago, she wouldn't have known how to answer that question. But now she looked around at the clean streets, the neighbors waving to each other, the kids playing basketball in a driveway across the street. She thought about the community center where they held meetings every week. She thought about the network of people who looked out for each other now. "It's a good neighborhood," Maya said honestly. "It had some problems, but people came together and fixed them. We watch out for each other here. It's becoming the kind of place where you'd want to raise a family." The couple smiled, thanked her, and went to look at the house. Maya watched them go, then looked down at Justice. "We did that, boy. We helped make this place safe again." Justice's tail thumped against the ground a few times before he went back to watching squirrels. That evening, Maya sat on her porch with a glass of lemonade, the same porch where her grandmother used to tell her stories. She could almost feel Grandma Rose's presence, could almost hear her voice saying, "I told you this neighborhood needed you." Her phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Verdict came in. Derek got 15 years federal prison. The others got between 5 and 10 years each. "It's over." Maya read the message twice, letting it sink in. It was over. Really over. She'd come back to this neighborhood expecting to just fix up a house and maybe find some peace. Instead, she'd found a fight worth fighting. She'd found a community worth saving. She'd discovered strength she didn't know she had. More importantly, she'd learned something her grandmother had probably known all along. Change doesn't come from waiting for someone else to fix things. It comes from ordinary people deciding they've had enough and doing something about it. It comes from communities standing together instead of standing alone. Maya looked out at her neighborhood, at the home she'd fought so hard to keep, and smiled. She was exactly where she was,